everybody, welcome back to the channel. Steven here, Northwest Small Batch Brewing, and it is time for a brew talk. I am between brew days. I'm brewing something currently, but as far as posting a full brew day, this is actually one of my most recent ones. This is my Baltic Porter. I was going to say the head retention was not so good, but it's been sticking around pretty good for now, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's improved being in the keg a little bit longer. Anyway, today I want to talk about something that I think could be helpful, especially to a newer brewer, and that is, you'll hear a lot of people say, what's wrong with my fermentation? Why did it stop? People get hung up on the numbers, right? And they'll be like, why is my gravity number just stopped? It's not reaching what it's supposed to reach. What do I do? How do I fix it? There's a tool, something you can do that'll give you like 90% of those answers. Cheers, by the way. Oh, so good. Check out my Baltic Porter recipe. I'll post a link in case you want to check out that brew day. It's very good. Good recipe. Anyway, so there's a little tool to fix this. So what you do is you use something called a forced fermentation. All right. So I think this is going to be handy if you're a new brewer. It gives you a troubleshooting, tool. But also, if you're somebody's there, I know brewers that have been brewing a long time, and they like to brew the same beer over and over and over, and they just tweak maybe the grain, maybe the yeast, maybe the temperature, maybe the mash temp or whatever. They like to tweak it little by little to get to dial in this recipe until they feel it's like perfect for them, and then they'll move on to the next beer. That's not how I brew, but I do oftentimes come back and rebrew a recipe that's close to what I wanted, but didn't quite get there, and I want to try a different variant. So I think this tool could help those people as well with troubleshooting. So basically what you're doing is you do your regular brew day, you do your mash, do your boil. Essentially, just before you're at the point where you would add yeast, you're going to set aside a portion of that wort and create its own little mini fermentation. Now, you do need an Earl, how do you say it? Erlenheimer? You'll need a flask, okay? Anyway, you need a flask for this because I guess maybe you don't have to do it in a flask, but that's how I've always seen this done. If you're someone that has a flask from doing like yeast starters, you could use that. So there are a lot of brewers that already have one. I don't, because I don't use liquid yeast, but at any rate, you're basically going to create like a forced little mini fermentation within that flask. So you pour in around 500 mils of wort, and for reference, that's about one beer's amount. One beer glass of beer, or bottle of beer or whatever, that's about that much beer as far as volume wise. So you're not putting that much aside. You put that into your flask, and then you're going to add some yeast. Now here's the deal. You're going to, with that kind of wort, you're going to add around 2 grams of dry yeast, or like 10 mils of like a liquid yeast slurry if you have it. So it may not seem like it, but this is way too much yeast for such a small sample, for that 500 mils. You don't need that much yeast, but there's a reason for doing that, for over pitching, and I'll explain this in a second. So you put it on a stir plate, you add your stir rod, and put it about medium speed, and then set it out. You're not going to drink it, so if you want to put some foil over it or something just to keep most of the bugs out and stuff, it's not something you're going to consume, it's something you're going to measure. All right, so you let that, so your beer, so when you pitch the yeast for that, you're also pitching your normal amount of yeast that you're using in your full beer, in your fermenter, pitching them at the same time. So you have this double regular fermentation and a mini fermentation going on with the same wort at the same time. Now you might ask, well, how's that going to help me? By the way, you also put yeast nutrient into your mini fermentation. So here's the deal. and you put a good amount of your yeast nutrient. After, say, 2 to 3 days after fermentation started, not from when you first pitch the yeast, but once the actual fermentation you see starts going, you start taking measurements, right? And you'll get to the point where you hit what you think is terminal gravity over a few days, right? You hit the same gravity number each time. Now, the question is, and I'm saying taking samples from your mini fermentation, that your little test jar. If you hit the gravity number you were expecting to hit, that means you're good, right? That's good. But what happens if your main fermentation is under, over on the numbers at that same period of point of time? So that's where you're going to get the information you need to find out, is it stalled? Is it completely stuck? There's other things that can happen too, right? Keep in mind, and I said this earlier, that you overpitch the yeast and you put extra yeast nutrient. So that little sample that you're fermenting is got more than it needs, right? So if your beer that you're fermenting stops and it hasn't hit the same final gravity as your little sample, the most likely possibility, I mean, obviously there's temperature, but if you have your sample at the same temperature, that's probably can be ruled out, right? If you do it at room temperature, then that might be another thing you can test for. But it's probably that you didn't put enough yeast, so you underpitched, or you didn't put enough yeast nutrient in it. All right. How about if you come out too low? You can go either way, right? You can also test for if there is not enough or too much fermentable sugars, right? So that will be based on what temperature you mashed at. So you may have to adjust that. Basically, you're using this little sample as like a little sight glass to tell you, if this sample is being brewed at the perfect situation, overpitched with yeast, so there's enough yeast, more than enough yeast nutrient, right? So that if that thing hits the correct numbers at the end, then and your main beer didn't, then something you did during the fermentation caused it to not hit that final gravity that you wanted, right? You're using the same yeast, you're using the same yeast nutrient, you're just giving every possibility to that little, and plus you're stirring it, right? That's a huge part of it. You have a stir plate going. When you keep the yeast roused, it also tends to get it to ferment faster, right? Again, you're not looking for flavor, you just want to see, does it hit the gravity number you were expecting? Is it low or is it high? Instead of going by what's in your software for your recipe, you can look at that sample instead and go, hey, my sample ended 3 points lower than I expected. So did my main beer. Then I'm okay. That just means that either the yeast was highly flocculent and it just ate through the sugars, much more than another kind of yeast might, and it's dried it out a bit. It might also mean that you have to change your mash temperature. It could be either one of those. The point is, now you can troubleshoot and dial in if you want to try to figure out, okay, what am I doing during my fermentation? Because let's be honest, the fermentation is probably the most important part of making beer. We tend not to always treat it that way, but that's where you're going to get 90% of your off flavors. That's where you're going to have problems with it not fermenting all the way, or going too dry, or all sorts of things, right? So this is just one sort of tool you could use. Anyway, if you've done that before and it's helped you, put it in the comments. I'm curious to see. I think it could be super helpful, especially if you're making the same beer over and over and trying to dial it in. Anyway, I'll be back in a week with another beer-related video, either some sort of topic like this or a brew day. Sometimes I do a little whiskey tasting. Who knows? But I'll see you next time, and keep on brewing. Cheers.